You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
Welcome back to another episode of Mission Log Engage, the show where we engage with you,
It's so
our lovely
engaging.
audience.
I feel very engaging right now.
I engage with you, John. You engage with me. We don't necessarily get engaged, but we
No.
engage with
Hey,
the comments.
whatever floats your boat, man. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, welcome everybody. This is where we get to tackle your comments and questions and ideas and thoughts and ruminations on what we do. So thank you to everybody who writes us and has written us over the years. I mean, I literally, I will sometimes go through my email and I'll respond to something from a year ago. And I'll say like, hey, sorry it took me a year to get to this, but it did so because this was a thoughtful email that needed my attention. And sometimes those are the ones that are harder to get to the soonest, you know? So surprise people, you might get an email from me that's like answering something from a year or two ago. Ha, that's the way I work. So what do we have in the mailbag this week, Norman?
So we have an email from Jenny from Melbourne, Australia.
Cool. Don't they say it Melbourne? Am I doing that right? Melbourne.
Melbourne?
Melbourne.
Melbourne?
I don't know. Sorry,
I don't
Jenny.
know. But what I do love is that it's all the way from Australia, which is great.
I love that.
Right. And Jenny says, I watched the above episode today in preparation for this week's podcast, as I normally do. As I was watching it, I suddenly thought that despite mentioning a couple times in this episode about Jadzia Dax being a mother and a father, I have never seen or heard about this in any other episodes. Where are the children? I know some would be dead because of the time that has passed in between the symbionts' lives, but there must be some alive, and Jadzia didn't seem upset or concerned about these children, but she was eager to have more with Worf. Have I missed something along the way that explains never hearing about these children before? I hope you can help me as I am very puzzled by this. That's a great question.
I'm puzzled too. I mean, and I apologize. I didn't have the exact episode title in there. So sorry about that. But suffice to say, this is more of a general question because Jadzia mentioned many times in Deep Space Nine about how as different permutations of the Dax and host combo, there were many children. And that is so frustrating because you can kind of get the you kind of get that sidestepping the question about what they do with former lovers, or they say, well, you know, once a symbiont is joined with a neutral host, they can't engage with their former lovers. Okay, fine, we just broke that rule with Worf.
Says them.
Yes, yeah, right. But the children, that's a very different thing, and we haven't actually addressed that. And part of me wonders, is this just DS9's incredibly inconsistent track record in dealing with families and families with children? Because on the one hand, you got Joseph, Ben, and Jake Sisko. Awesome. On the other hand, you have Miles and somebody else. And then the history of Star Trek, going from Next Gen, bridging into DS9, you've got Worf and Alexander, of whom he will never speak. Yeah.
We never speak of him.
Yeah, right. So I wonder if it's just that inconsistency. I wonder if there are stories ever floated out there about what if we meet one of Dax's children who's now like 150 years old, or, you know, there could be some interesting things to play with there. I also wonder if it's just sort of a trap that writers fall into, because we've discussed it before on Mission Log, how there are so many orphans on Star Trek. And it's not just Star Trek. Somebody did a similar thing looking at like all the Disney hero characters, and they're practically all orphans, you know? And I think it's just sort of this easy thing that writers fall back on, where if you're going to have this hero's journey, they have to accomplish everything on their own, which may make for an interesting story, but it's also not necessarily that realistic. Like, where are the stories about the people who come from supportive families and have backgrounds that clearly show you how they got to where they are.
I mean, I thought it would have been a really interesting thing. Thank you for this idea, Jenny. If, say, an elderly person, an elderly Trill, knocked on Jadzia's doorstep or even Ezri's doorstep and said, who are you? I'm like, I'm so and so. I'm your son or your daughter, and then have to deal with just that circumstance.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Because in a previous episode, I was talking about how Trill are essentially immortal, because if you take care of the host, that host lives on, and those memories lives on for generations to come. In Highlander, the TV series, or even in the movie, they had to deal with not having children, but they also fell in love and they could adopt children. They just couldn't genetically have children themselves. So what happens when you have somebody who's immortal, who lives for hundreds of years, have to say goodbye and come to grips and terms with people in their lives that they love, who will eventually grow old in front of them and then eventually die? How do you come to grips with that? And I
Yeah.
think that would have been so fascinating to see an actress of, say, Terry's caliber or of Nicole's caliber grapple with that, and then extemporaneously or extraneously say a Worf, or a Miles or a Cisco, people on board Deep Space Nine that are their friends, that have children, and say parenting is about raising the best possible relationship that you can with your children. Orf, and then dealing with that.
Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah, no, I just have to wonder if this is something that was ever discussed, if they came out, or is it just this wildly inconsistent, well, we did a family episode here, we kind of talked about children and family stuff over here as well, so we're just not going to go down that path. Maybe it's a question we'll get to ask of somebody someday. But in the meantime, you can keep asking us questions. Email us, missionlog@roddenberry.com. Send us a message on Facebook or Twitter, Mission Log Pod. And remember to subscribe here on YouTube at Roddenberry Entertainment, where we are in the Mission Log Engage playlist. Till next time, everybody.